Well, I think the first thing we need to think about is that the global economy should be understood as not being slower or accelerating, but we are seeing a fundamental restructuring of the global economy. And so companies must learn to address these fragmentation that we see in the global economy. It's not a single global economy. Within that fragmenting global economy, I think what we see is three key industries are very important. One is, of course, AI, artificial intelligence, which is, of course, going to have an impact on all sorts of industries. It will not just have an impact in development of AI and selling AI models, but it will affect healthcare, it will affect other sectors. A second area in which China has been very successful and probably the leading sector in one of the leading countries in this sector is robotics. And I think we can see that the Chinese are very strong in robotics, which is closely tied to China's expertise in AI. So if you combine AI with robotics manufacturing, I think that will be a very important area for the Chinese in which to succeed. The third industry that's very important is, I would say, the energy system. As you know, AI uses a lot of energy, and so there's now a very big emphasis on building these grids that can provide the energy that is needed for AI companies. And I think there's a whole interest in transforming the sector. We see that in China today. China has undertaken this transformation more rapidly than any country in the world. And so that's an example where energy production will be very critical to the future of the global economy. So firms need to operate in this fragmenting global economy, but they need to take into account how they can be well received by other countries as well. Hard technology is often developed by universities. Sometimes hard technology is developed by various firms. And of course, if you're in the venture capital business and you are thinking about investing in hard technology, you have to worry that this hard technology may be very exciting, quantum computing, other kinds of technology, but will they really be commercially viable? So one needs to really understand this interplay between hard technology and commercialization. And then one also has to figure out where in the world one can find markets. And so if Chinese companies can be involved with standard setting, they'll be much more successful than if they're just passive acceptors of the technology regulation. I think the Chinese have promoted a policy that's been very successful of what we call industrial upgrading. So before, China was just producing clothing and shoes and light manufacturing. And China has been able to go into shipbuilding, it's been able to go into solar panels, it's been able to go into wind turbines very successfully. I think one of the biggest problems in the global economy is that success of China has also generated a backlash, both in Europe and in the United States. And so in that situation, Chinese companies need to learn how to have a global strategy, but at the same time, they have to learn to localize. And to localize means they have to work with the universities, they have to work with the unions, they have to work with other firms so they can be part of the ecosystem that they would like to operate in. So I think it's not just a simple matter of having one strategy for every country. One really needs a kind of what we call a multi-domestic strategy. Every market is different. So I think what the Chinese firms need to do is understand the link between market strategy and non-market strategy, and therefore be more successful in their expansion efforts. We've already talked a little bit about China's success in a lot of areas like AI and robotics. China's also very successful, as I mentioned, in these new technologies, which is solar and wind turbines, electric cars. So I don't think that's the problem. The problem that China faces, and it's a problem that many countries face, it's not just China, is that with this kind of fragmentation of the global economy, we cannot operate in a single market. So what does that mean? It means one has to understand how do you adapt to each local market. And it's not just adapting, you also want to be proactively working with stakeholders in every market. And I think that's the critical thing that needs to be emphasized. So Frost & Sullivan has a lot of experience over the last 65 years on working on market strategy, and also, as I've been brought on, to work on non-market strategy, that is to think about how you deal with stakeholders. I think that's becoming increasingly critical these days, as I mentioned, with the fragmenting global economy. You cannot just have one single strategy. So Frost & Sullivan has scenario planning exercises, it has expertise in particular industries, it follows the policies that are being pursued by different countries, and so I think Chinese companies and companies around the world have been able to benefit from that expertise that Frost & Sullivan can bring to the table. And so I think in this case, I think companies need to think about what will their global strategy be, but at the same time, how will they figure out how they can enter different markets successfully. It's important that Chinese companies are well received and well accepted. And to do that, a successful non-market strategy will include working with all the stakeholders in every country. And I hope there that Frost & Sullivan can be of use.